And let me sort of lay down a bit of the thinking that I have heard and have learned from industry, from science, from NGOs, and how I see the situation and the possibilities and the challenges. One, of course, is that we are in massive change, and that is a paradigm change when we are talking about sustainability. It is tenfold resource efficiency. We can't continue using planets. It's about understanding the biodiversity and the climate change and the planetary boundaries, not separate issues. It's like trying to make a fish soup by arguing, is the potatoes more important than the fish, or should we boil first the onions, and you use a lot of time and put a lot of effort and you do not ever get the fish soup, and then you pour all ingredients together and call it interdisciplinary approach, and still it doesn't taste like a fish. Then again, if you have sort of the clear picture, the right question, and that is the system thinking and the paradigm change, okay, what is the problem actually, and what needs to happen? So then it is much easier to figure out the recipe when you have the ingredients on the table, right? And it is much faster to do it. It's much more effective. Plus, it is the so-called synergy. The sum of the ingredients is more than just the sum, and voila, you get the soup. And I guess that what we are trying to do here in the globe, and what the science and what the education should do, is to try to learn the people first of all the system thinking, and then secondly try to create the ecological competence. And you know, I've been trained and educated in the School of Economics and Business Administration, so I know my sheep very well. And you can't be a board member or director in any public or private entity and not understand accounting even a bit, or auditing the accounts or balance sheets or economy. You couldn't run a business and tell, well, you know, I'm just making great things by them. And when the investors ask, but what about your profitability, would just look with 100-mile look and say, well, do we have our finance director somewhere? He knows the figures, let ask him. Because you would be considered a risky business and incompetent. And that goes to the board members. I've been in a couple of boards. You couldn't go there and say, look, what? Audited accounts. What return on investment? Well, I don't care about this. I just want to talk about sustainability. Everybody would laugh me out of the door in first 5 minutes. But then again, you can be this ignorant working and leading businesses and politics. And we see that, I guess, every day in and out. And you might understand that, okay, resource efficiency, or okay, biodiversity here or there, or you might understand, of course, the climate change, we need to adapt. But then it is this picking the onions or the potatoes for the fish. And the ecological competence, you know probably what I mean by that. It is not only the system thinking, but it is understanding the construction of planetary boundaries, of ecosystems, services, about the interdependence and connections of the different parts, and then understanding that we are just the tiny parts of the whole system, whether we like it or not. And in the longer run, if we do not adapt or adjust, that's not a big deal from the planetary point of view, but that's rather a horrible point of view from the human race, and that matter of the cost of economy. And why it is so big cost of the economy? None of the economic regulation or regulation that matter develops in vacuum. So it is this kind of a Dr. Livingstone, I suppose, worldview that created our thinking. It was abundance, new places and resources to explore and to use. And it didn't make any sense to ask, what about the planetary boundaries? Like now it wouldn't make any sense to ask. Well, actually, what about our multiversal systems? Do they really stand the human consumption? Because that would be totally irrelevant question. And now when we see and feel the limits of the growth and the limits of the planet, you just need to adjust, and this is a huge task. The regulation, the budgeting, the metering, like the GDP, you need to adjust and change totally your business model. Not tweaking whatever you happen to do slightly better, but getting out of the box and thinking, okay, not harming biodiversity, totally closed loops, designing out of the waste, not harmful chemicals, not hazardous only, but harmful chemicals, and not only preserving biodiversity, but increasing biodiversity. How the heck I'm going to do it when I'm making chocolates or mobile phones? And then it's totally different business models. It is, as you know, the lease economy. It is designing out of the waste, it's longevity, and all what the circular economy package actually has in this. So, this is my first question and challenge. How do we make this? How do we make the science and discussion on this system view and ecological competence to all universities, to all grades of education, and what is the methodology? How do we teach it? I'm not a competent person on this field. But certainly it needs new ways. You can't just sort of back it up on mathematics or on your whatever Swedish language courses. You need to figure out how you do it. Then secondly, we would need to create partnerships with very different levels of education and work life. Let's pick up the companies. They might, take seriously this challenge. But then again, who are the advisors, the mentors, the personal trainers? They would come from the science and universities. When they have the question, what do I do with my carpets or my phones or my clothes? Someone would need to think it together and recreate, and then pull the different ecosystems, business ecosystems and working ecosystems together. Then this is the second challenge. And the third challenge, and now we are going to workers and professional levels. We talk about sustainable buildings, and it is a clear vision. Our universities and our architecture are filled with that, It needs to be modular. You've always played with your Legos. It needs to be upgradable, so you can fix it. It needs to last 100 or 200 years. It needs to be totally reusable, so the elements would need to be planned so that you can reuse them and fix them and upgrade it and whatever that is, and what materials that would mean and what chemicals and so forth. And you would need to know how to repair the old buildings. It's the renovation rate, because 80% of the buildings exists. The same with the textiles, how you plan and where you produce and how you produce and all that. You need the people to do that. And my experience is very limited, but in Finland, when I'm trying to discuss with the construction industry, what they say is, we do not have the workers, we don't know, we don't have the engineers who could draw and think how to do it, and we do not have the people constructing who would know what it means and how to do it. So how you sort of make the understanding and the competence in all levels, and of course the worker shouldn't think that, I'm just putting the concrete on here, don't ask me, I do what I'm told to do. But they would need to understand whatever is the timetable and why it needs to be dry, or what I need to do in the process, and if I'm demolishing a building or recycling it, why I can't break the windows and so forth. So that needs it. And then the easiest part for this is let's think what would be this educational structure here. And then we are educating the youngsters. But we can't wait 20 years to have the new generation in workplaces. We have the people already there. So how do we educate them, upgrade their knowledge, or re-educate them, or educate them with the motivation in some new professions? And quite often what I'm come up is that there's this kind of a mental obstacle. For example, if you have been a hard miner for 3 generations, suddenly someone goes and says, well, it's nice to be green, and let's figure out together how you could put the solar panels on the roofs and educate people on energy saving. It doesn't fit his psychology. What he would like to do, I don't know, to be a cook or to be, I don't know, a constructor or whatever. So our sort of a re-educational systems don't catch very well that you can't go sort of energy is energy, be it renewable or be it coal. But more this kind of intuition, the passion, and the feeling what people want to do. And then last but not least, 2 points. I'm very skeptical that any of our member states could do it by themselves. So we would need to have a European roadmap. Member states, EU competencies in education, but let's take it. If you have new competencies and you would need to have competent professional qualifications, you need to have them on EU level. Then secondly, we would need to sort of lean forward and have the new knowledge, and this is the European educational area and university and all that. How does that fit on the picture, so that this is not just a puzzle where you happen, sorry to say, but in many cases it's still, you just sort of glue together different kinds of bits and pieces of a puzzle, educational courses, fit them together or not, and say, well, this is European. It's not that, it's something what is created on European level and that gives extra value because it gives extra thinking. And then, and this is my favorite idea, it's actually not, these are just questions and challenges, but one of the ideas what I have is that we would have this kind of science advisory board for EU, not only for Commission or Council or Parliament, and definitely not separate ones. And we have all the institutions, we have ESACs, we have LERUs, we have about 5 major bodies and scientific boards. It's a bit like the role of IPCC, but a bit changed, to have all these questions on the table and ecological competence. And then again, resources and ensured independence. That means that it could choose, okay, we now look the nature restoration. We assess what needs to happen. It wouldn't do it, the research by itself, but collect and analyze and make this kind of a peer review. Then it would analyze the Commission proposal. Okay, dear Commission, you are here. And the Parliament and its proposal, it would say, look, you would need to be here, you are probably here, if you are lucky and if I'm sort of overestimating the Parliament's capacity. And it would say to the member states, sorry, but you are hardly on the map. That you are going to have the problem even bigger ahead of you. And then to have some sort of an enlightened guess or judgment about the cost of non-action that we never see. I've heard in my group about 2 hours cry today, group meeting, about the excessive costs of Green Deal and excessive costs of the new directive of packing and of nature restoration and of pesticides and of this and that. So people tend to look that you could continue. It's like a cancer patient would say, look, I'll continue, look the cost if I would need to take a leave out of my work, won't do it. look the cost of operation, and now you are putting me on operation, and I hate operations, I don't want to do them. And don't even talk about radiation therapy or some other medications to me. Let's come back after 2 years and let's see if then it is serious, then I might consider. Or I might consider doing hard what you propose. And so we do not have the reality check of what really needs to happen. And this is something that the science should sort of mirror to politics, and that's the most important. But not only that, because someone wants us here. It would be for educational system, that people sort of get the point what we are doing and why. And for businesses that is more and more growing in enlightenment and still, but still we have those laggards saying no, and Europe is killing itself because of this high ambition on environment and so forth. So that's just one idea. But then the last question is line actually would be what all we should be doing in European level, and how do we sort of make this as this kind of an intellectual package. Probably can't make it ready today, but maybe after your comments later on, how you can make it so that we can push it on the Commission's next work program. That was all what I had to say. More questions than answers, but that's hopefully at least the right questions, or at least some of them, or at least one of them might be the right one. And now we'll start with the opening keynote. Welcome, Emily. And Emily Synod, you are the head of the Policy and Strategy Division in the Economics Department of the European Investment Bank. And you will share insights from your survey of corporates and local governments, what kind of a green skills we do need, and what are sort of the basis what we need for green investments, and where are the sort of the shortages of green skills. Emily, very happy to have you here with us, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Actually, you've given me very nice leading comments, because I think a lot of what you've said is actually reflected in what we're being told by corporates, by firms, and also by local governments in terms of the obstacles that they're facing due to skills and implementing their green investments. So I'm going to show you a few slides and make some comments. I hope this leads on to the discussion. I don't want to take too much time from your discussion, so I'm going to probably not go the full 15 minutes. But every year the EIB, we work mostly with corporates, but also with governments. We survey our clients, so 12,500 firms in the EU countries and also in the United States, and then about 800 governments, local governments throughout Europe. And we have a big focus because of our portfolio on digital and green transition and the kind of needs there. And we've also been hearing a lot from our promoters on the skills issue. So some of our questions are very targeted towards this, and we also have some associated research. So if I start off with the starting slide, I mean, this will come as no surprise to you, but skills shortage is an obstacle to green investment. That's one of the major obstacles. So 81% of firms and 62% of municipalities report that the availability of skilled staff is a big obstacle to investment. And what do they mean by this? So we go on to the next slide. We have some questions which get a bit deeper into what are the obstacles to green investment. And municipalities say, okay, firstly, regulations are a pain. It's very hard for us to be certain on what's going to happen in the future with regulations. The length of the processes can be difficult, but after that, actually, a big issue is just technical capacity. And then we ask them, well, what do you mean by technical capacity? So they say, number one, okay, if we want to put in place a big urban investment project on green, environmental and climate skills we need people to be able to do the assessments, but also to do the plans. So many local governments want to put in place a plan for decarbonisation. They want to look at energy efficiency they then need the people to help them do these investments, and that's something that these are skills that are actually very hard to find, and even more difficult in, say, the less rich areas of Europe. So because these are, I think, skills that you often find in urban areas, it can be very difficult in certain regions to actually find them. Then just engineering and technical skills, so having the engineers for all of the projects, having that availability is an issue. Digital skills are getting better. We see in Europe, though, that in terms of advanced digital skills, the agenda is shifting very, very quickly. And many of these advanced digital skills, like AI, are needed for green activities. So there's a big link between digital and green. And then legal, tendering and procurement on the finance side, that's kind of improved. So those areas have actually improved. They still can be difficult, I think, to get people at the cost you need to contribute to your projects, but it's somewhat, you can see that the environmental and climate comes out as number one. So then we wanted to actually to ask, okay, so if we go to the next slide, what are green skills? And see where we are in terms of green skills and what do we mean by green skills. So we were looking for data on this, and actually LinkedIn has huge coverage in the EU in terms of people. So they have done a very nice study, and we're actually trying to get this information now at the regional level in Europe on green skills. So they identify kind of key green skills, but also green jobs. And then they look over time at trends and what's happened and where the kind of big growth in needs have been. So, of course, as you could expect, the green jobs, so your solar technicians, your wind turbine technicians, sustainability manager, environmental safety specialists, there's been a huge growth in the need for those kind of roles. But there's still just about 1-2% of the kind of greening of jobs. The majority, actually, of the greening of jobs and where green skills are needed are for existing roles. And this graph here shows the big growth of these needs within existing roles. And so what you can actually see from here is that fleet managers, data scientists, are also areas where you really need to have these kind of green skills kind of developing. So it's not just having these very specific green jobs, but also bringing those skills into your existing roles. And that's, I think, where we face a lot of challenges, because it involves training people in jobs, upskilling, and a lot of flexibility. So if I go on to the next slide. So of course there are, in terms of just transition, there are regions that are just going to be hit very strongly by kind of dying industries. And coal mining for one, for example. And we know that this is hitting regions it's very difficult for some regions, particularly in Western Northern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe, where there's high employment in these sectors. So these particular workers are going to need reskilling completely, in order to be able to shift industry. So that's obviously one issue. And I think that's kind of very apparent when we talk about the just transition. But there are other aspects. So if we go on to the next slide. Another thing that we're worried about is that people are not left behind. So if we actually look at this LinkedIn data and we looked at green skills across the population and the growth over time, so what we're seeing is, first of all, the growth in green skills is faster amongst workers holding a bachelor's degree. So the level of education matters. There's a gender gap in green skills. So globally, only 62 women out for every 100 men had green skills in 2021. It's been pretty stable at that level. And then the younger generations are developing more rapidly these green skills. And given the aging of our populations in Europe, etc., this shows kind of the need for us to try to have greater flexibility in individuals' life cycles so that they can actually adapt to this fast-changing lifestyle. So then, if I go to the next slide, one issue is that, firms are telling us that their skills are a major obstacle that has really risen over time. But investment in staff training has kind of remained the same. And even if we look at those firms that say that skills are a major obstacle, and we have a lot of follow-on questions, they're looking externally for these skills. There's not a big difference in how they're training their workers or the rate at which they're training their workers compared to companies that say skills not necessarily the main obstacle. And this is concerning because we know from the psychology literature that particularly as you age, on-the-job training is the most important way of you kind of acquiring new skills. So you don't learn in a classroom very disassociated with your role. So there's a very big agenda here for firms to get on board with. It's not something that the public sector can do alone. So then if I go to the next slide, please. So we've talked about the divergence in challenges in terms of regions and sectors. What we're also seeing is a very big divergence in the response. That's a divergence in training. So the greener firms in richer EU regions train more. So we have a kind of a criteria for assessing whether firms are greener. And what we find is, okay, in the richer EU regions, you're actually having, so the non-cohesion developed regions, we use this terminology in the IB, as you're familiar with. What we're finding is that actually the least rich regions, you're having a lot less training going on the firm side. That's in general, but I think on the green side, we're also finding that. And then the greener sectors are involved more in training, so also this is an issue. So the sectors that kind of need to green more are the sectors where we're not having the training that's needed. So, these kind of inequities in training provision are going to be something that we're also going to have to tackle. And then if we go to the next slide, please. This is more generally, and this is just not just for green and digital, but one thing that we're very concerned on is the participation in lifelong learning is very low, and it's about the rate. This is from Eurostat, from their labour force survey, about 12% of adults said they participated in learning over the last 4 weeks. And that almost halves for those that are lower qualified. So I think that's a concern in terms of also having people left behind. And then in addition, we're concerned very much on some of the leading indicators on youth. So too many are not gaining a firm basis for education. So almost 10% of young people aged 18 to 24 in the EU were early leavers from education and training in 2022. And we have some countries where practically 40% of 15-year-olds are functionally illiterate. And we know that, according to PISA, the OECD PISA, we know that you set the basis for training, lifelong training early in life. So given the shifting workforce, we're seeing the big change in needs. This is obviously an area where we can do better and deliver more to our youth. And then the next slide, I'm sure people are going to bring this up. I mean, our workforce is not just aging, but shrinking in some countries as well. And this is something we're going to have to deal with. And this is something where we're going to have to adapt our training programs and our agendas and plans to really see. We're losing in some countries almost 15% of the workforce between 2022 and 2030. So how to develop skills for a sustainable future? I just wanted to leave the next slide, some talking points leading into the discussion, and I'm sure there's a lot more to add. Obviously, skills are key to the green transition, but there's a very wide agenda. So from the high growth, research and development, innovation that we want to see, to retooling workers in current roles, to retraining those in declining sectors, creating new skilled jobs, preparing people for lifelong learning, not just for green, but also for all the big digital challenges that we're facing. The transition is occurring very rapidly, so this industrial transition is extremely rapid, which will really entail needs for workers to be very, very flexible and to be supported in this. Firms are going to have to take a key role in investing in training and skills development. Coordinated action across the private sector and education training providers is going to be needed to deliver timely and targeted training programs that are tailored really to sector needs. And we need to pay attention to the groups that are being left behind. And then finally, one thing we wanted to leave with you, we thought one thing that was quite interesting with this US Inflation Reduction Act was they had a link to skills and training. So some of their loan programs, in order for you to benefit, you had to have higher paid jobs and apprenticeships. So we thought this was actually a nice feature, a way of linking investment to good jobs and to developing the skills we need. So Thank you very much. And that was very rapid, but I think we can share the presentation afterwards in case.
Thank you, Emily. A lot of stuff in very short and concise and effective form, so thank you for that. Do we have questions or comments right away? Because then I think that we could take the business perspectives, the 4 speakers as a slot and discuss that. And then the 3 ones from the educational perspective as one, and deal you with yourself now first. Yes, please.
Yeah, Nicholas, Professor of Law. It seems to me that your survey, or at least your analysis based upon the different surveys, highlight a very industrial dimensions, and in particular with renewable energy. So the remark regarding regulations, that's really coming typically from this category of industries. It seems to me that what's missing in the picture is the ecosystemic services and the ecological restoration. That's really where, according to many deans of faculties of biology, there is really a shortage of courses on ecology. And young people for now 2 generations choose mostly bioengineers or genetics rather than ecology. And there, given the sheer level of task with respect to the restoration, although the new regulation might not be as ambitious, but there's still a significant need, be it with respect to the Natura 2000. So I don't know why this is missing from the picture.
No, fair enough. I think when you actually looked at this LinkedIn data, this does come out as a role where there's growing demand. So that's it. The regulation that actually comes from local governments, the uncertainty on regulation, the length of processes. And so that's not just renewable energy, it's probably a lot of it is urban transport, waste and water. And particularly in some of the municipalities, there are big, there's big goals in this area because they have very insufficient social infrastructure at the moment. And there, I think, when they're talking about environmental assessments, this ecology and diversity angle is very, very important. So you can imagine with something like water or railways, etc. So this certainly comes into our projects. So each of our projects that we do, and we never do them on our own, we have to do at least 50% with somebody else. So that's normally, in the case of government, we have like a whole set of social development, environmental standards and expertise that focuses on diversity and these other issues. So I think the standards in Europe are, I think, high, and they should be high. It's what we hear is, and of course renewables, this is wind turbines, etc. We all know this is probably a very special case. I guess what they're saying also is when they're building flood defences, this type of thing, which need to be rapidly deployed, they often come up with this regulatory uncertainty, very lengthy processes. It's very hard because they do have environmental impacts, and that's going to be a challenge because there's a very strong trade-off, for example, with how you manage floodwater and how you do that in such a way that's effective while also protecting environment and diversity. So certainly I think it's a very complex and challenging area.
Thank you. Do we have in this point, we'll have a roundtable discussion later on, but we have at this point some other questions or comments? If not, thank you, Emily, and we'll continue with all of us then a bit later. And now then let's turn to our panel. Each speaker has about 5 to 7 minutes. And this is the private sector perspectives on the skills and educational gaps, and this is something what we really need to take into account, and this kind of a ground floor experience and knowledge what this really means. And we'll start with Andrea Caldeassa. I hope I didn't do too much wrong with your name pronunciation. A senior manager government affairs with Microsoft, and you will discuss what is the Microsoft Boston Consulting Group report on sustainability skills and the need for employers to upskill their knowledge as workforce. So, Andrea, please.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is a topic that we have looked into, and I'm actually glad that you've mentioned LinkedIn. They are part of Microsoft, and it is one of the sources that we also look into when it comes to green skills and what is happening in this space. So really happy to be part of this conversation. I'll try to go over some slides and some of the findings from a recent report that we have drafted together with BCG. And then looking forward to really a conversation around practical ways to advance and then make progress in this space. So if we can go to the first slide. I mean, we all know that there are so many companies around the world that have made sustainability pledges, and it's been a few years now since we see a lot of announcements from companies making these pledges. But then what we also realize from ourselves and from the experience that we have internally at Microsoft, but also with our customers, is that progress is not happening as fast as it should. And then one of the reasons why this is not happening is because of we need a workforce with sustainability skills to help bridge that from commitment to progress actually. And then again, very interesting finding. Very interesting fact is that from the states that are part of the Paris Agreement, less than 40% include any plans for skills training to support the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and then over 20% of these states do not have any plans to invest in human capital. So while I mean, it is also a personal opinion, but I think we can all agree it's really the human capital element that is the foundation to this transformation. And without this, we can talk business models, we can talk, operations, as you've also mentioned, but without really taking the people, and you need to look at different kind of layers of the workforce. Without investing in the human capital, this progress will effectively not happen. And if I can make one analogy here, because we talk very often about sustainability fluency, so we need to start speaking the same language, right? But it's a little bit, if I can compare it to computer science education. As the world has entered the digital era, we had to. We're still working on that. It's not an objective that has been fully achieved. We had to bring computer science education in school, computers on desks, on, you name it. So it's a little bit similar, I think, with sustainability. It will have to be infused in all sectors of the economy if we really want to achieve progress. So specifically to the report that I've mentioned, and you can move to the next slide. What we did was we selected 15 companies that are our customers that have made a lot of, that have put a lot of effort and investment in innovation around sustainability. They publish reports around sustainability. They put a lot of efforts into this, and we have asked around 250 of their employees what's working, what is not working, where do you think you could potentially do better. And some of the recommendations from the report on the next slide include, and I'm actually happy that there's a lot of commonality to what has already been mentioned, which means that I think we're all looking at the right problems, but it is important that we get together and we combine kind of efforts. So one of the things that we learned is that the data is out there. There's still not enough of it. So we can still do a better job at really gathering data around, what are sustainability skills? Because there's different things related to that. I mean, you can talk about, electricians who are now, have to work with solar or wind energy and so on. Or you can talk about scientists. Or doctors. Or you can talk about agriculture. So I think every sector has its unique kind of transformation that needs to happen. And there's data around that. There's a lot of efforts around, understanding evolving jobs. Labor markets are really transforming. There's a shift in jobs and labor transformation. Workforce shrinking. What are the occupations that are shrinking? What are the new roles that are becoming available? And what are the skills that are needed for those? So that would be the baseline. And then in terms of what companies can do, and it was also again another point that was mentioned, we need all to do more in terms of retraining our employees. And it's something that we've learned at Microsoft as well the past few years since we've made sustainability commitments. Once we made those, it was a really steep learning curve to actually understand how are we going to do this. So from accountants who need to learn carbon accounting, from product designers who need to learn about eco-design, and so on and so forth. Everyone needs to have, that shift in, it's systemic thinking, as you've also mentioned. And within companies, it's also a question of change management, right? It's like you can't expect such a radical transformation to happen overnight. So, and everyone needs to be on board, from front workers to scientists to the boardroom, and everyone needs to kind of drive the same to work towards the same outcomes. And then next to what we should do to help upskill workforce, preparing the next generation of workers is equally important. So starting really from early age, I would even start with kindergarten, but maybe that's too ambitious. But I think we need to slowly have that understanding of what does it mean to actually have a net zero planet. There's still, we use these terms very often, but I think if we are to ask different people, like, what do you mean with that? There's little understanding about what this means in practice. We will all have to change behaviors, things that we do on a day-to-day basis, and that I think there's still a long way to go until we get there. And so if we can go to the next slide, one of the things that we consider very important is that we need to really double down on making sure that European citizens are equipped with digital skills, because a lot of the sustainability jobs or sustainability-related tasks are grounded on digital skills, right? I mean, there's a list that we have here in terms of data collection and management, or carbon accounting and reporting, business intelligence, design, visualization. This is all, really grounded in digital skills. And when we look at the EU and at DESI indicators, there's still so much work to be done. So starting from where we already have, effort, and just doubling down and continuing that, and then adding, more specific elements relating to sustainability, science, or very specific, tasks around sustainability. And I also wanted to share a few resources that we have put together on the next slide. So we have started working with we have a learning path focusing on digital green skills. So again, for people who are doing marketing, understanding what this means. We're doing design. What does it mean to do green design and so on. And these are resources available for anyone who's interested. Really, we have them available in a few languages. If you can go to the next slide, please. Then we have a learning center, and I won't go through all of this. I'm happy to make the slides available, and anyone who's interested can click and access. There's also, in terms of education and curriculum, some game-based curriculum with sustainability focus, and then we have a partnership with UNESCO that we've started, and it's in development, around providing some of the content that we have developed internally also for teacher training. teacher training and everything that happens in that space is yet another very important conversation. And one more example around the work that we do in this space is the so-called Microsoft Sustainability Academy, which is on the next slide. And these are, again, resources that are available for anyone who's interested to sign up on demand or self-paced. Introduction to sustainability, or more for sustainability professionals around green gas protocol, ESG foundations and standards and climate action. And again, if anyone is interested, this is something that you can sign up to and follow the training. I know there's a lot of similar resources out there, and from what we have observed, there's a lot of demand as well. So we get thousands and thousands of requests for people who would like to sign up to these programs. And I'll stop there. This is just really quickly going over some of our findings and then some of the resources. But just maybe building on your introductory remarks, I really like the idea of the roadmap and really like the idea of creating a network where we can get together and discuss how do we take this forward. It is on everyone's top of mind, but with the competence around education and skilling the way it is across the EU, progress is not just as fast as we would like it to be.
Thank you, Andrea. And yes, indeed, we all are the blind men touching the elephant and trying to guess what this is, and so we need quite a lot of each other on this debate. Then we'll move to Gülsin Berkel-Erem. Did I get it right?
Yes, very well.
HR Director with Dow, and you will highlight the challenges in attracting the people with right skills and the need for partnerships with local schools and educational centers, how to do it and how to build their skilling. And then the STEM education, if of course, important part of that, and of course the gender challenge that actually is new to me, that it is of course in the digital field, but on the other fields it is so big. Please, Gülsin.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to represent and speak on behalf of Dow. And it's a very relevant topic for us from an industry perspective as well, because we have a long-lasting commitment as an organization to the decarbonization and making sure that we also meet the ambitious targets of the Green Deal. We have recently have very, very important also commitments and investments with some of the other companies as well, to make sure that we are becoming the most sustainable and inclusive and also innovative and customer-centric company. And industry is also committed to make sure that we're doing this. Some of those projects that we have is also helping to not just the decarbonization, but the chemical and mechanical, also recycling processes as well, like in France, in Germany, with a company called Mura, and also in the UK. These projects and our commitments and investments to the ambitious targets of the Green Deal is also requiring skills, because we are going through an amazing transformation as a company. I think we've talked about the greenhouse gas emission reduction. We have the same commitments in our major production locations, like in Netherlands and Tunisia, in Germany. And those commitments requires, of course, us to transform our production facilities, right? So we have to transform and get into the new technologies and new processes, and we are very aggressive internal targets, obviously, as well to meet those commitments. And our major, of course, challenges, as we've been speaking, is the talent shortage and also the speed to attract and hire talent with skills to become more greener, of course, as a company. So that's really what we are also focusing as an organization, to make sure that we are helping both the industry and also ourselves to get the right skills into the organization. We believe there are, I think, three areas that we can find some solutions to get the talents we need to transform the company and meet the commitments we have. First of all, we think that intensivizing or probably not the right word of saying is, but intensivizing the STEM training and education. I think that's what we've been talking. And sorry, I missed the first part of your speech, but it is really important, especially the chemical industry is requiring skills and majors in like physics and engineering. And Emily, you've given amazing numbers about that. There is an incline in engineering education. An interest also from the younger population going into the STEM, like into studying engineering or physics or science. And our industry demands those, even that sounds like a basic skills, but how do you transform a company, right? You have to continuously bring those. And so it is really important that we have to attract the younger generation going into the even kindergarten, right? Making sure that they're interested and attracted to science and technology. Skills, and also obviously the curriculums and the schools providing more sustainable and green skills at a very, very early stage to increase the interest of those students and graduates becoming available in the market for us to be able to get them attract into the organization. And obviously, we've talked about curriculums as well, and we have seen this with the pandemic situation, right? The digital skills, and from one day to the next, that the students have to become learning the hybrid skills. The teachers as well, right? It had to become critical at all levels that they needed to help the students to remain attracted, right? To the skills and technologies and everything. So we believe that it's important. That it's not just only the talents itself, but the whole ecosystem of education, together with the schools, even families, we believe, because industries, the young generation are becoming more in their mindset is sustainable, and sometimes they believe maybe certain sectors and certain industries and are not so attracted to them. So, but science and like the chemical industry is also ultimately important for the improving the innovation, right? I mean, we've seen this, that innovation could also make lives better for everybody. So how do we encourage from early age, right? And the students, families, teachers, just to get into the STEM skills, obviously important. Of course, we talk about technical skills a lot, but of course, the soft skills are equally important, right? Flexibility, adaptability, and also resilience. Again, we've seen the challenges going over the years, right? Both from geopolitical or pandemic situations and change management we've spoken about, right? So some of those soft skills equally important into the STEM skills to make sure that that the whole ecosystem is becoming integrated. And we also would like to ensure, I think, the diversity and inclusion is important pillar to close the gap that we have in talent shortage, especially on the gender side, but not only. We know this diversity, gender equity index has been the focus, which is really good and shows also in the industries such as like power and energy and transportation, very male dominant, sectors and focus areas, and we need to ensure that we are making also programs and curriculums also attracted more to the female. I think Emily shown the 60%. And so how do we close the gap? We have the highest gap, especially in our industry, but again, not a lot of engineers, female engineers are interested in necessarily going into the science. So it's not only the gender gap, obviously, but we also see within the European region, because talent pool is accessible across the borders, right? So it's not just only within the one state country, but across. For example, we have a presence in Netherlands and Tunisia, and Tunisia is a location. It's an example that it's not maybe the most attractive location for the young generation and the talent. And typically, people want to live in Ghent, in Belgium, for example, or they want to cross border to another country to work. And sometimes, the legislations don't allow people to just have cross border. Sometimes it's the tax systems. And especially during the pandemic, we have become very flexible in where and how people could work. And we've seen some limitations that they could only be limited to work, for example, 1 day of work. So especially if we want to tap the female talent, some of those, create some challenges for us to be able to not attract, the people with the right skills. So, and last but not least, obviously, how do we continue attracting and making STEM skills for the industry attractive and interesting at all levels, to make sure that again, families, at the primary school level, secondary school level, that there's more access. And thank you, Andrea. I think you've also given very good examples, like how everybody could access the curriculum and the skills and the technology, and so that these topics are becoming more and more interesting, and because it is for us ultimately required to help our transformation as an industry, especially to make sure that we continue our commitment. We are, so many years committed to meet the requirements of the Green Deal as well. So, short but not least is we're developing like Formula One car. It's always my analogy, right? But we need the drivers and the maintenance guys and the people who are actually able and capable to drive the Formula One car, right? I mean, we can develop the best technologies ever, but if you don't have the people, the car can just stay there, with nobody able to drive it. So that's I would say. So it's basically, how do we close the gender gap? How do we make the STEM skills attractive and ensure and also adjust to the needs of the industry as well. So thank you and open for questions.
Thank you, Kyusin. And then we'll move to Bart van der Watere, Vice President of Corporate Communications and ESG engagement in Nestle. And your topic is from theory to practice, how to cooperate between public and private, and how to support the youth and promote digital and green skills that go hand in hand more and more in the future. Please.
Yeah, no. Thank you. You said it. I want to focus maybe on a few practical experience that we got, because we started our youth skills program. We call it Nestle Needs Youth 10 years ago. We celebrated or commemorated, I would rather say, in Lviv in Ukraine, the 10 years last month, because we started the program there actually for the whole of Europe, and we went back now in the wartime also as a sign that we want to be committed to the youth and to the future of the country as well. In the end, the skills program started when we got this high youth unemployment, and one of the main things that we realized, and Emily, you mentioned it also briefly, was that in the countries where we saw that there was the culture of apprenticeship, traineeship, you got lower unemployment, youth unemployment, and in the others you got this issue. So basically that was the starting point. How can we expand what we have? And remember, we are rooted in Switzerland, and there is this big culture of apprenticeship, and you go to a company and you even get another degree later on, and so Germany, Denmark have this as well. So basically, and that's maybe something you refer to it, what can we do with the member states, because they have the full competency there in education. I think we worked a lot with the European Commission as well as part of the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, which was a bit of a public-private partnership with other companies as well. We went country by country where we were, notably around our factories, because it was in the beginning very much focused on vet students, but we also did it with universities and things like that, more linked to our headquarters. And then we were really in alignment with the local authorities or the local governments in charge of education. We almost agreed on the curriculum and how it could be. So work-based learning schemes basically that we have been setting up. And I think this was really the thing that, and Sue left already, but I worked with her a lot and her colleagues in the European Commission at the time, also how we could transfer these practices to other regions and so on, so that we can really build up with other companies these work-based learning experiences. In the meantime, the program is also global. We have also engaged people in our supply chain as well, other companies, and that was really bringing more mass, because of course, okay, we have many factories, we have everywhere headquarters, but still we are small in the perspective of what Europe is, so we need everyone to push for that. So this cooperation with somehow a framework at European level was working, even though it was not maybe what you would try to aim for, and I would be supportive, honestly, for that. We can actually use that system also for the green skills, because it's actually, it's now in place. We have many more places in Europe where we offer these work-based learning schemes. As you said, both Andrea, Emily, if you look at it, and you said as well, the net zero commitment that we have made as a company, that is a complete transformation, because it's all about embedding it, because in the business. Because if you would just do the commitment and you don't transform the people behind, you will have just a sustainability manager, and he will sit there and he will shout, guys, please, no. It's everybody, so every function needs to be reviewed, new functions and things like that. The particularities, let's look, just to give a few examples, the procurement guys. Before they were just dealing with, these are my specifications, please give me your best price, negotiate down. Now it's about getting together with the Cargills of this world and you say, okay, tell me how, because as part of net zero, we have this regenerative agriculture where we really use the soil as the basis to regenerate, basically, and the farmer is instrumental, but the supplier between us and the farmer is these guys like Cargill or Rocket and things like that. You go to them and the procurement is no longer just saying, okay, guys, how can you give me the lowest possible price for the best quality product? No. Can we do a partnership? How can we retrain your farmers, basically, that you are doing? What are the kind of advisory services we put? What is the part of the premium we put for the farmers? What are you putting as a premium? And so on. So you are really starting to speak about partnership with your suppliers rather than more of a transactional situation. I think the same in the financial things. They are really starting to calculate, okay, the investment for 1 ton of carbon less and things like that. So that's complete transformation. I have seen this evolution because I'm since a while in the executive team committee in Europe. The complete transformation since we are in this net zero commitment, how the CFO of our zone speaks right now, and how he has to reskill himself ultimately and his team, and how you have really in his team now people completely dedicated to sustainability and what we call regenerative performance rather than just financial performance. So I think that's super important. So this reskilling internally, for example, for circularity, but also for net zero, we have e-learning and trainings that is mandatory for everyone. But of course, it's adapted to the role they are in, so that at least they know what it is, and then it's applicable to them. So that's big transformations, I would say. I would also like to spend a few minutes maybe on the farmers, because you mentioned nature restoration law and other things. I think one component is as well that when we speak with the farmers, when we embed them in our sustainability programs, of course, that doesn't go so easy. And there is a generational aspect as well, because some of the farmers, they don't have successors and so on. So they are no longer interested to speak with us, honestly. Fine. So what we need is young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are really seeing, I have a successor and I want to give this to my son or daughter, and they can really bring it to the next level. And this is, but we need to help them as well. How you can create a sustainable business based on regenerative agriculture. It looks easy, but it's not, because with the farmers, you need to work probably 5-6 years before you have found really the way, a successful business model. So you need to de-risk them, you need to help to train them. You need to create networks between farmers, because this is the best way how they actually have trust that it can work. So that's so all these kind of things. So the agripreneurs of the future, and it's only that when you embed it in your own business, but also end to end, basically in the food system. So it's also all the skills for the food system. Only then you will basically transfer or transition the system, and I think that's super important. And I think this topic is passionating us a lot. As you can hear, and from the colleagues as well. So let's move.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning this cooperation with farmers, because the common agricultural policy and agriculture is not technically the most difficult, but mentally it's the most difficult area. And so I think that this kind of cooperation with business partners is much more smoother way than the way than just sort of try to win the big fight. Okay, last but not least, Rasmus Spoos, and now we go back to the digital area even a bit more. Business Development Manager for Education Solution and Services with the Lenovo. And your focus is in artificial intelligence and how this is going to change everything, basically.
Yeah, so I hacked it a little bit since.
Yes.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that also.
Okay,
Yes,
can I get the slides on, please? Just the first slide. So I think in interest, because we're listening a lot, I'll front load the sort of the things that I'm going to say a little bit, so you know what I'm going to talk about. So I'm basically going to say, I think, 4 things. First, I'll talk a little bit about the challenge that we're facing with AI in education. Education, especially K-12, is very challenged. And it's challenged because the model of education and the way we think about pedagogy is very challenged by the occurrence of AI as we know it now. So I'll give you examples of next generation AI. What is that exactly going to do? And why do we need to think in a different way around it, right? So that's the first thing. Did you find the slides?
Not yet.
Yeah, I saw you open them earlier.
Yes,
there you go. Yeah.
It's there,
So the second thing I'm going to say is, are we nearly ambitious enough? We talk about sustainability. Sustainability, from where I'm standing, is part of a regenerative movement. Thank you for saying it. And sustainability is sustaining status quo, but we've already lost a lot. So we really need to regenerate, not just in the climate, but also on the human capital. And not just by skilling people, but also look at what happens in the workplaces. People are getting stressed, leaving the workplace. There is the whole idea of how we work and how we live and how we use needs to have a different approach. So regenerative mindsets, how do we instill those? Then I'll show you a very small but not insignificant project that we've done in Lenovo, which is towards the schools. You can get it to work. You should have bought a different PC. I see it's from a different maker.
No,
It's actually from Lenovo. Oh my god.
it's not the computer that's at fault. It's
Probably Microsoft.
Is the deck?
it's WebEx.
No, it's WebEx. Okay. So okay, that's a little bit confusing. I'll just pull up my deck here because I actually need it as a backdrop. So, as a fun thing before I started doing this deck, I look back at something that happened in 2011. So I've been dealing with this subject for a long time. And in 2011, the Institute for the Future came out with a report, like, they love to do this. What are the future work skills in 2020, right? What are we going to need? And they identified 6 drivers. And if you could see them on screen, you could read them. Extreme longevity, we're going to live, if you're born in 2017, you're going to be more than 100 on average. So that's going to happen. Internet of Things, next slide please. There you go. Internet of Things, That's the computational world, superstructured organizations, that's happened. Globally connected, that certainly happened. COVID pressed on that. Media ecology, look at what our kids are doing with their phones, they're doing new stuff in new ways. But last but not least, the rise of smart machines and systems. And what they did was they looked at this and said, so what skills are we going to need to cater for this? What are we going to need to do with our kids? And if you press one time, they came up with these skill sets. They're not exactly different from what Microsoft came up with, 20th century skills, things like that. But there are a few really interesting ones, and I would just point to sense making. So now we're able to ask ChatGPT about anything and get an answer. Does it make sense? How do I know? So in school, you're given an assignment, you have to answer, you ask ChatGPT, you give it back to the teacher. How do I know if it makes sense, right? So instead of having a knowledge paradigm in school, in K to 12, what paradigm are we looking at? So please, next slide. So Lenovo, we're the biggest PC maker in the world, and we're really good at the left side of things. So we build lots of computers, and we're a horribly black industry. I'm sorry for saying it. We're changing, but it's not good enough yet, right? But we're really the Death Star. Doing computers and everything you sit with requires a lot of material, and it's not good enough yet. But we're getting there.
It's not very longevity.
But AI is even worse, right? So one time you ask ChatGPT for one question, it's $1 of energy. One question, $1, right? How many prompts are you doing? A lot, right? So what's happening now is that we're moving AI from the cloud and into the pocket. So if you press one more time. So next generation of devices will move into your pocket. You'll have it built in on your phone. And you might think, oh, that still requires the internet. And the answer is no. It actually doesn't. So the next generation of phones will be able to build a profile on you, understand who you are, and it'll sniff the internet. So it'll all the time suck down information which is only on your device. It's private to you, which is great. And when you switch off the internet and you sit in an exam, you can ask it to generate your assignment. So back to the school dilemma. We still have systems where they say, oh, we need to leave the mobile phone out. We need to push this one out. Okay, we can have it in, but you can't have internet, which then you can use ChatGPT. But the next generation is going to kill that notion because it can do it anyway. So we need really seriously to think about the foundation of everything. I think everybody said something really sensible, but the foundation is missing because we keep generating the same problems. Students are not ready to do what you're asking them to do. And the mindset is not there. So please switch. And that's, if you look at it, right, we now have at least three types of artificial intelligence. You have the public one, that's ChatGPT, that's one everyone can access. Companies have their private ones, which is only for selected groups of people. And then there is the personal one, which is the one that's going to frighten universities to death. Because I could actually sit with the phone, and I've seen this live, go to Austin, land, switch off the internet, and say, so what concerts are coming on tonight? And it would know. Because it knows I'm interested in music, so it would already sniff down that information for me, so I wouldn't even need to be online. And the reason we can do it is because we have very advanced compression models for data today, so it's something you cannot fathom, but it's there, right? So big dilemma for the schools. In a way, having dealt with this, I used to be a teacher many years back. I'm happy because finally we actually do need to change the model in schools, but it needs to come from legislation as well. And we should push one more time. The poor teachers, right? We talk about upskilling. Teachers get probably the profession that get the least upskilling of all, and they're probably the ones that need it the most. So if we want to teach the kids to be proficient with this, we want them to have all the skills I showed before. How are the teachers going to deal with that? It's a completely new teaching paradigm, learning paradigm, and yet we're giving them a few days a year. I think the EU has a very big job there, and I'm looking to you because I think that's because otherwise we'll keep generating the same thing. The teaching culture is the culture on earth that takes the longest to turn around, right? Because it's so stiff, and it should be, but now it needs to speed up. So otherwise it's never going to stop. But there is hope. So if you press one more time.
Good.
Because in some countries, and like my own in Denmark, we are actually, putting through legislation now that technological literacy should be part of everything we do, right? And it's not a fixed size or form, but what I really like about it is looking at the tool, whatever it is, the hammer, and saying it's part of social and cultural, understanding. And so by combining those concepts, we really perhaps enable teachers and students not to have training every time something new comes up, but to be able to consider what is right to use, what is ethical to use, and how can we use it, right? So that's the first one. So I said, this is what we need. I think we need to push much more on, because it will enable people to use these things as much more than just a hammer. It will also let them understand that this is part of an ecosystem which, is everywhere we go today. And if you push one more time. And so back to the future work skills. If we look at it today, we would add ecosystems out of balance. This is my addition. It's not the future, Institute for the Future. Because what I said in the beginning, it's not just about the climate, but it's also about the people. And the people are stressed out. People are getting sick. There's a lot of systems out of balance. And so being regenerative, and if you push one more time, and I think this is a really important point, is it's not just about the outer things. It's about how we also cater to the people and what happens inside. And so I think whatever you do with the legislation, whatever you think about, we need to integrate that regenerative movement beyond agriculture, beyond, it's a people movement, and it's a mindset that we need to think about how we instill. And so with that, I'll go to, and it's going to fall completely flat, but I'm doing it anyway. Press the button, right? So we did a project in Lenovo, and I only have these 5 to 7 minutes, so I'm going to... For every year in EMEA, that's Europe, Middle East, Africa, we ship more than 1 million devices to school students, right? That's 1 million boxes going out. I'm happy to say that it's the cardboard that's going out is good. If they put it in the right bin, it can also be reused. But we thought a lot about it and said, it's a lot of material going out. The only use it has is to wrap this and then it's gone, right? So together with Intel, we built this project called From Waste to Wonder, thinking about how we could teach kids STEM skills, but also a little bit of the mindset of what we already have, we need to use in more ways, right? So I'll show you a small video, and that's it. Oh, sorry. That's all I have to say. It's just a small video on how we can think about these things. And this is a small step, but I believe that the big steps comes from here, but the small steps we all need to take, right? So this is one of the small steps, but 1 million of them every year. So one time, and probably one time more, yeah. Ooh, yeah. And there is no sound, just horrible music, so don't worry about it. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Rasmus. And I do have a comment and question for you, but I'll leave the floor for our other audiences first. So let's open up the discussion for our business panel and the perspective of private sector. What would you like to ask, or do you have any comments?
No, you I think a lot of what I've heard sounds fairly familiar. So I think that's a good sign that we're sort of on the same page. Well, I mean, I'm still to talk, so I'm going to sort of refrain from saying more. But, as I will make the point in my presentation, I think the interaction between universities specifically and business world is really lacking in many areas, and certainly in this one. And there are big advances to be made there, in terms of collaboration, partnerships, and so on.
I have a question for the private sector, actually. One of the things that I seem to hear talking to peers and colleagues from other companies and other sectors is that next generation of students, next generation of graduates are looking to work in sustainable places, whether it is, companies or businesses or NGOs and so on. Is this a challenge that you're facing in your companies? Are you losing talent against other types of sectors that are not industry? Is the next generation of graduates perceiving industry as a sustainable place to work, or a place to work that is contributing to sustainability? How are you dealing with that?
So we're not. I'm sorry to say we're not feeling it, but I think the tech industry is it's part of the problem. It's part of the solution. So I think by going there is a lot of opportunity to do better. That's also why I'm saying we're not nearly as good as we should be yet. But AI is a problem, but AI is also a solution. So I think that's why a lot of young people are still very attracted to working for the tech industry. And that there is a lot of promise in it, and we certainly need them, but we're not seeing it yet.
Maybe just one addition is I agree with you. That's one part. The other part is what you said, Catherine. Is fundamentally when you work through work-based learning, you have the people experiencing what you are. So that your recruitment actually is completely different, and also the way how they see you might be very different than what is always being said. And that's, I think, also quite relevant to add.
At the same time, I would say it's what we see is people that look for jobs, young talent that we try to acquire. Their mindset is changing, definitely. Right? So it's not only about what's on the payslip each month. It's also about, do I get enablement to get my job done? Do I get growth and development opportunities? And sustainability starts to sink in. What is the stance of my future employer on sustainability?
I think adding to what Rasmus was saying, I don't think we see a challenge in attracting talent in the tech industry, but what we have observed is a shift in approach from employees and also younger ones that are that feel more empowered to challenge internally business decisions. So within Microsoft we have sustainability community that is employee-led initiative, and very, very, very often you see a lot of communication coming out of that group challenging certain decisions, and then sometimes because of it's a huge group. There's thousands of people who are part of that, and sometimes business decisions have been turned around because employees have said, "Wait, you've said something,
and now you
need to walk the talk." And that's an extraordinary development, I think.
There was one. I took a note when you were speaking and this is actually connected to this. So in France, they have the legislation that 20% of what the public sector buys needs to be refurbished, right? So that's a good move. When we refurbish, and you would know this as well, you take an old PC and you make it work again for another lifetime. There are two things that the public expects, and this is the problem for us. They expect it to be cheaper. It's not, because you have to buy a used machine and make it work again, ship it out, put warranty on it, all of that stuff. So it's not cheaper necessarily, and they expect it to look new. Which it doesn't, right? So the perception issue around what can you expect from things moving forward also needs to change, and I think it's connected to this because the same young generation that are looking to be green, they don't want my greasy PC when they start, right? They want to unwrap a new one. So it's a funny dilemma that we're facing, and we're seeing this, so we can't just refurbish and have a cycle of that, because people are actually not happy with what they're getting, and it's a serious dilemma, right? And it's something that needs to change slowly as well.
There might be design. They say young people are very happy with older clothes, or, so it might be just you need to rethink the design and that something looks better with age. Yeah.
Well, let's hope that
Retro, it should be called retro.
Vintage lamp.
Like if you have a vintage leather bag. It gets even better the longer you use it and shows the sign.
But then, do you have an old Nokia with you, by the way?
No, of course I don't.
Well, it's a thing from Finland, you might,
Yeah.
3210.
But it is about the thing that we know that I buy a new one every 3 to 5 years, not because I'm craving for new aluminium and acrylics and what.
No.
But the old one doesn't function anymore. And you can't say replace the battery in any way if you could. It's too slow with the new applications and stuff, and you know the story how it goes. And that is how you make them upgradable, so that I just sort of bring it back to you in case it whatever, and you fix it over. And I could endure that it is a greasy stuff and a bit used. And if it's too broken, then you can fix the layout of it.
Yeah.
But it would function. But that's a couple of very interesting points I would leave with your thinking. You might want to comment, but not necessarily if you don't. And one is, do we need the teachers? Yes, we do. I had good and bad teachers and anything in between in my lifetime. And the mediocre and the bad are either worse than good books or more or less the same. I don't need the teacher to read aloud what I can read and learn better from the books or somewhere. But I need teachers. You are my teachers, for example, now. The teachers bring perspective, wisdom, and different windows, different angles to issues. But this is the capacity, as you referred to teach the teachers, because too many a big part of the teachers are still loudspeakers when the books were rare, and someone would need to read them and then to replicate the story for the other people. And real teacher is Aristoteles or something like that, that makes you think and understand and evaluate and all. Well, you all in this field know what I mean, but how do we do that? And the AI hopefully does it for me in the future. Nowadays, not even close. It's the sense making that the teachers do, but the chat GPT is far from that. And so if I want to have this kind of evaluations, what we need to do and what is the challenge, I need the interaction and I need the wisdom. And this is what the education should bring. And then another point there is, I was so happy when Andrea said that your workers are sometimes challenging you. Because if you have this attitude that I'm all in favor for a better planet and planetary boundaries and recyclability and you name it, but I don't want to have a bad old phone. Then it is the way how you think, how you act, how you design the next phones, because you think no one wants to have the old phone. But if you really sort of, it's a lot of values, and this is part of the ecological competence and thinking, because then you want to create that kind of a vintage that someone wants to have after 20 years. Actually, some of the very old Nokias are pretty good and they are still functional. And I'm not mentioning any Samsung or trademarks. But this is one sort of the thing, and that is reflected. And this is one problem with the AI, because it's still a bit of the black box. What are the values it is regenerating in its evaluation, in its planning, in its whatever? And if it regenerates this sort of a cheaper, better, brighter, more bling and faster, we are in a deep mess. And then with this, I think that some of you, especially working in this digital area, and I know that the Dow has sort of a plan how to make this kind of a circular chemicals and all that stuff. So it is in and Nestle and what you are doing in that. But there's the big question: how do we solve the challenge of digitalization? It's coming more and more gadgets, more stuff, shorter lifespan. Yes, you can refix them, I know. But if the AI is all over the place, the chips are all over the place, is my sort of a refrigerator going to stop if it can't order the milk from the shop? So this artificial ordering stuff and all this. And it sort of doubles, and it's going to speed out of the energy and transportation, as you know. If you look the gadgets, if you look the energy consumption, if you look all that, within a bit more than 10 years, this can't happen. And I'm not any type of the engineer. The big question is, how do you avoid that? Because all of us want, and I want, that we use the benefits, the knowledge of the artificial intelligence, the speedy access, and I don't need the teachers to evaluate what are the best restaurants or what politicians near me think. AI can do that. But then it is consuming energy. It needs new gadgets and so forth. And the Parliament actually asked the Commission to come up with the sustainable digitalization program. It did not, because there was more acute things, and plus after discussing I understood they did not take this idea what that would be and how to do it, because none of us do. But this is certainly something that we would need to leave on the table.
So I think we need to move with the next speakers. We still have 4.
Yeah, and then we'll move up to the next set and start with Catherine Mess, a special initiative ambassador of engagement and impact with the League of European Research Universities. Please.
Right, thank you for inviting me. LIRA is a membership organization of 23 research-intensive universities in Europe, and we exist as an advocacy and lobby organization in Brussels, just to make that clear. Where I come from, so my perspective will be mostly one of how do universities as organizations deal with the sustainability transition in terms here of their educational offerings, although we also work across the university, that is not only education but also research and innovation and public engagement, of course. And we've done an interesting piece of work on procurement and finance and investment at universities in terms of sustainability, if you're interested in it. But now I'm working with this group, with representatives, a working group on sustainability, with representatives from every university, and we're working on education and sustainable development. And I use sustainable development because I want to make sure that we talk about the bigger picture, not just climate, environment, biodiversity, but also about things like poverty or equity and so on. So some of our universities use the United Nations SDG framework to anchor their activities in. Many do. Let me talk first about, since I'm talking about this, is strategy at universities. You see, of course, that the sustainable development is now, at least for my universities, integrated into their overall strategies. Sometimes they have a specific strategy on what we call ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. And let me remind you of the definition that the UNESCO has, which is both about knowledge, about skills, about values, and about agency. And I can talk here until tomorrow about skills, but I think what we're hearing today is those values, and that agency is really important and what we're going to need to work on. So the ambition is there, the reality is there. I know that my universities are in different places and in general also running into obstacles and implementation problems. Connecting the dots across the university is particularly, or across an organization, is always difficult it's very difficult for universities because there are so many different disciplines and faculties. It's like a fleet, and in a fleet, the different directions are taking. I think it's therefore very clear for universities that if you have a top-down strategy, you also need to take into account what comes up bottom up, and that one size is not going to fit all. That is, often heard from the different faculties. Yes, but for us it's this way, and that doesn't work this way. So you need to be able to work with those different. And I'm not trying to down them. Those are valid concerns, but for universities it is an issue to work with. The second one is that it is necessary to conceive of this as a continuous participatory process. So where ideally you try to marry the top-down with the bottom-up initiatives. Coming from universities, there's a lot of driver on this is also from the student side. So the green offices and so on, the demands for better education on sustainable development is very student-driven as well. There's also sometimes government incentives, like in France, the education department has ordained that universities will now integrate sustainability into their curriculum. Universities have to work within the national context that they have. Europe, in this regard, really does not have anything to say. That's the truth. That's the way it is. And we can change this. And I know that there are people within Europe talking about changing competence for education at the EU level, that it may become a shared competence. But I think this is probably an illusion because the member states will never allow this, I think. But anyway, I'm getting off track. If I look at terms of curriculum development, I think you see both new programs developing and integrating sustainability across the board in all classes. And I've heard from previous speakers that the latter is something which is really important. Building new programs, in addition, is hard when you want to do that for tens of thousands of students. You often need government permission and so on. Nonetheless, you see more and more bachelor's, master's degrees in all kinds of sustainability areas, specialized or more broad. The multidisciplinarity is very important. I know this is a very difficult, thorny issue. We are now in Liru already did our second paper on interdisciplinarity. We had to rewrite it after 4 or 5 years because things are changing, and it remains to be a very difficult topic. Because the silos, if I can put it that way, certainly exist at the university. I think what is really important there is to look at this transition and the need for the human aspect. And so let's not leave the social sciences and the humanities out of this, which is what tends to happen. If there's interdisciplinarity, it's between biologists and engineers, or between the medics and the engineers, and so on. But do we ever ask about, the humanities perspective, social science? We don't enough. With AI, the ethics of the AI, we need to ask a lot of those questions. That's where it's coming out. So that is really a challenge. When I look at beyond programmatic and curricular developments, there's a lot of all kinds of education activities that are free and voluntary, elective, and so on. So there too, the challenge is in getting to more mandatory courses or mandatory activities for students. That is also a hard one, but we are seeing in those 2 years that we worked on this topic, I can see my people saying we see a trend towards more mandatory incorporation of sustainability into the courses and into all kinds of activities that students do develop. There are practical hurdles, from majors that don't allow students to take this or that course because it's outside of the faculty or it doesn't fit the core curriculum, etc., etc. But there are ways around it developing in terms of other ECTS credits or micro-credentials and so on. So things are developing there as well. Very important problem, staff training. We've talked about it here as well. Universities face that as well. Staff need to feel supported if they have to do this, and we can't really yet tell them you have to do this. Academic freedom is something which is then traditionally invoked as a barrier to this. This does not fit in my course, in my discipline. I don't need to do this. Some of them are keen to do so, but do not have the tools to do so. So we see the institutes for integrating sustainability into the curriculum developing. Those are some initiatives that are underway. My university's also said, well, let's work with front runners and coalitions, those that are willing, and you build it up that way, because shoving it down people's throat at a university does not work very well. And you also risk if you just force people to take the training, they'll just do it and won't learn and won't implement it. It's just like, yeah, box ticked, done that. I'm done. And the last point is about lifelong learning. I think very important in this in this discourse. Whether it's professionals, retirees, all kinds of learners, returning learners, and so on. Luckily, one of the things of COVID is that we've learned fast how to do things online better. The groundwork was already there, but we really have become better at our MOOCs, at our SPOCs, and so on. And this is also, I think, a way where universities see the importance of networking beyond the university with their cities and with their regions. Cities, I could mention, for instance, the climate neutral cities mission. My university and city, Leuven, are partners in this. You can bring in the businesses, you can bring in the students, you can bring in the university, and this is a good ecosystem to try and develop activities there. In general, this was going to be my last point. I say the business world, I said it earlier. In the times that I talk to my sustainability people, I don't hear them say business a lot. Not a lot at all. I'm sort of understating, but you say almost nothing about it. So I think that's where we need to start talking to each other, because we share a common ambition and we share a lot of experience and a lot of things that we could learn from each other. But we are not doing that enough. So partnership, I think, is really important. I could say a lot about skills and knowledge and the difference. And the need for universities that cannot teach a specific, for Dow or for Nestle or for Microsoft. Universities cannot do this. They can come some way, but they also have to make sure that students have the right skills for looking at knowledge, for deciding what is important, what is nonsense in AI, what is ethical, and so on. So those deep analytic skills, the creativity, those are the types of skills that universities really need to focus on for, I think, the skills of the future. The rest, the employer will do. Yeah. And
thank you. There was a lot of stuff in very precise package. Thank you for that. And now we'll move to Cleona Murphy, Associate Professor in Science Education with the Royal Irish Academy and all European academies. Please.
Thank you for inviting me. And when Roland contacted me, he asked me would I talk about some of the obstacles that might be getting in the way of effective climate change education and for education for sustainability. So I kind of prepared to talk about that. But I think, looking at what you said, a lot of what you've said about the STEM education, STEM skills, is very relevant to what I'm going to say about regeneration of what we need to do in terms of professional learning for teachers. And then what you were saying then in Microsoft, talking about how to prepare the next generation. So, and I think, and then you started off by what is our key ingredient? I think I have the answer. So anyway, so just even looking, there's a plethora of initiatives that are run around all over Europe now to support, effective climate change education and education for sustainability. and individually for the European states, individual and even collective at a European level. So we have things even like recently, like the European Green Comp, which is the sustainability framework competence. We've got the new greening education, which is really an ambitious, with its 4 visions to try to do a collective action. But I will try to say these are all very, very important, and we should really welcome them. But there are some obstacles that are there and are going to continue, and I think we need to really start, if we want these initiatives to be impactful, we have to look at some of those obstacles. So, I mean, I'm going to talk about, are we looking for evidence? And I think we need evidence of what's out there. So there's lots of empirical research in terms of education, looking at climate change education, education for sustainability, as I said, at national and European level. But the same answers are coming, or the same obstacles are coming out, and it's coming to teachers. And they're our best tool, but also they need support. And there's 3 messages that I keep reading and keep seeing, and that's teachers themselves feel that they have limited knowledge of the science underpinning climate change and education for sustainability. Teachers themselves are saying, oh, I'm not confident enough, I don't feel confident or competent to teach these. And Roland-Jan, you could nearly take out education for sustainability and put in STEM education here as well. And then the other big issue then is looking at well, one of them is looking at the fact that the lack of sustainability or climate-related content in national curricula. To throw a couple of stats at you, UNESCO's recent report, well, recent enough, they looked at a survey of over 100 countries, and in that they surveyed teachers. And the fact, or I have the percentages here, but like less than 40% of teachers in those 100 countries said that they felt confident to teach about climate change. I think only a third said they could explain the effects of climate change, and less than a quarter said they could comfortable about taking climate action.
So to interrupt, is that primary, secondary, all?
All, yeah, primary and post-primary, sorry, not tertiary level, primary and post-primary, yeah. And then they looked at 129 documents, that's a figure for you, but they did. And out of that, 40% of those documents didn't even mention, these curriculum documents rather, didn't even mention climate change. And out of the 53% that did, I think was 47 very minimal, just a tertiary nod, or just a secondary glance at it, and only 2% of those documents said that they had fairly moderate addressing climate change. So we're looking for this soup. What ingredients are we putting into the soup? And I would think that moving forward, there are 4 things that we really need. And I think, Rasmus, you were talking about professional learning for teachers. And we have to look at that. And we have to move away from the one-size-fits-all type models of professional learning to more sustained, in-depth, longer-term professional learning. That affords the teachers, yes, to build up, and this is primary and secondary, their foundational knowledge of the science, essentially, but also innovative pedagogies, so that we need to support them in pedagogy, their pedagogical content knowledge, so that we can give them the skill set to engage our youth, to really, engage in innovative ways of learning. Put it in climate change education, in the context of education for sustainability, just learning in general, STEM education as well. I think we also need, in terms of climate change and sustainable development, we need content in curricula. And not only just the causes and consequences, but looking at agency, looking at action. And I think it was in COP26 at the Education Forum, loads of our ministers have pledged, that we are going to put climate change and sustainable development content in a national curricula. So we've got to follow up with them just to make sure that this is happening. Because if it's not in curricula, teachers aren't going to teach it. And why should we ask them to, they've enough to do it. The other thing they're going to need is the educational resources, and there's a plethora of stuff out, and all different organisations, Microsoft, Lenovo, everybody looking at these, and this is welcomed and warranted. But we need to be able to, they have to be context-based, that teachers can use them within their own context, in their own schools, in their own countries, and that they're aligning with curricula. Because if we want teachers to engage in these resources, they've got to align with curricula, and the pedagogies. They have to be underpinned by the effective pedagogies. The other thing that we've got to do, and this is really emerging, and I can see this in terms of Ireland, we're questioning this, it's not being assessed. So we have teachers preparing students to sit the state exams, and in fairness to teachers, they've a lot to do, so they have to cover the curriculum. So if it's not going to be tested, why should we teach it? I don't agree with that statement. I'm just saying, you know, but it's not just the facts that need to be assessed. We need to look at things like values, attitudes, skills, competences. So there's going to be issues around how we do that and the type of assessment, what we're going to have to look at as well. And then finally, it's research, and I know that's our bread and butter, but we do need to research, and we need to look at the evidence, and if we are looking at professional learning for teachers, is it impactful? Is it having the effect we want? Is it developing their competence? Is it developing their confidence? And ultimately, is it having an impact on student learning? So we're looking for the answers. I think, you know, we need to support our teachers. And if we're looking for action, if we're looking for agency, if we're looking for the next generation of workers for these new jobs, I think we have to start and really support our teachers, because I think that's one of the answers to the problem. So that's me. I was trying to be concise. I'm getting a bit passionate now, and I could talk forever, but I won't try to stop. Yeah.
Good, you keep the spirit alive with your passion. And the teachers are coming back again, and let's think later on what we could in the EU do or in the Parliament to encourage or fund or to do something in this field. Last but not least, Vito Borelli, a team leader of Erasmus Plus higher education program in the European Commission. It's your time now to discuss the program's focus on supporting European Green Deal and sustainable development, and maybe you have some answers to some of the challenges you heard. And with these words, I would like to pass the floor to my good colleague Paul to then lead the discussion and wrap up the discussion.
We can maybe continue until 15 minutes past if everyone is...
Okay.
I need to leave at 6. I can have some minutes.
Which means that I have 2 minutes?
Mine is good. I have some leeway, but I will run faster today.
I just wanted to start by thanking you, of course, for inviting me and apologize for my delay. But I had planned to be here from the very beginning to hear your introduction, but I got lost in the building. I had a wrong meeting number, and I spent 20 minutes looking for the place. And I'm not saying that only to apologize, but also because that brought me to reflect on the sustainability of the building. And sometimes it's interesting to think that perhaps also aspects that are not considered essential, like the easiness to find a place, is part also of the whole reflection on the sustainability of working places. But that being said, I will try to be very brief, linking to what I heard from the colleague before, I don't remember the name, sorry, who was speaking about the role of Europe. That seems to have not much to say when it comes to providing inputs and ideas and asking member states to sort of uniformize their action. This is not the role of Europe, of course, the European Commission. In the first place, the European Commission is trying to facilitate exchange of good practices, coordinate and exercise, and the main instrument that it has had in the last 37 years is the Erasmus Plus program. Needless to recall that. Erasmus Plus, which was only Erasmus until a few years ago, started as a mobility scheme that has become a powerful instrument of policy implementation by incorporating the main overarching priorities of the European Commission that are under the current edition, 2021-2027, fundamentally the inclusion and diversity, the digital transformation, the participation in democratic life, and last but not least, of course, the environment and the fight against climate change. The protection of the environment and the climate action have become really fundamental in the development of the program as it is today. The European Green Deal communication recognized the key role of schools, of training institutions and universities to engage with pupils, with parents, with the wider community on the changes needed for a successful transition to become climate neutral by 2050. And in addition to that, also the Council recommendation on learning for the green transition has emphasized the need to provide learners of all ages, and then lifelong learning is of course included, to find out about the climate crisis and sustainability in both formal education and non-formal education, and to make learning for the green transition a priority in education and training policies. Sustainability has become part of the entire spectrum of education, including curricula, professional development for educators, trainers training, and as well as buildings, infrastructures, and operation. Just to provide example of what concretely Erasmus Plus has been doing, that the program is currently increasing the number of mobility opportunities in green forward-looking domains, which foster the development of competencies, enhance career prospects, and engage participants in areas which are sustainable for sustainable growth, with special attention to rural development, in fact, with sustainable farming, management of natural resources, soil protection, bioagriculture. And for that purpose, it has very much invested into the traineeships, because mobility is not only for study, but also for training. And in that, we have established very close connection with the enterprises in order to facilitate also the identification of the opportunities offered by industry. Just to give a very simple example, through an app that the Erasmus Student Network has developed, it's called Erasmus Intern, that gives the opportunity to both sides to find the good matching of request and offer. I will have much more to say, but I will stop here because I don't want to take time from the final considerations. And I would just like to recall that Erasmus Plus is also important to reach out to and engage with a wide spectrum of players in our society, starting with school and university, but also with sport organizations, with NGOs, local and regional authorities, civil society organizations, who can become active agents in the transition towards the climate neutrality objective by 2050. Okay, I'll stop here.
Okay. Well, let me summarize this. No, that's not possible, but thank you for having this meeting. And I had to go out, it's sort of the busiest time for Parliament. We're trying to end legislation, so it's really, we're working at peak capacity to finish the files just before let's say half March is our deadline. So I had to go out, but I had some notes from my assistant. And I wish, like Vito, it could have been a bit longer, because this discussion is really challenging and essential at the same time. Yesterday I had a conference on the transition for finance. We see companies making a zero pledge. But it's very difficult to figure out. It's easy to make the zero pledge, but how to get there is extremely difficult. But this is with a very clear target in mind, right? The zero pledge is sort of, and still then finding your way forward is very difficult. And what I see here, all the different elements, and wondering how we're going to put that together. Right? So how we're going to find. And let me add my personal observation that I think the education system has been rather resilient for change. So when I go to the secondary school with my boys and think, well, that was just like in my days. And in fact, university is still, when I worked there, it was still a bit like. So education, honestly, has been resilient to change. I'm not offending it, but but we need to change, because I firmly believe that we're going to have a very completely different economy and society, because we need to transform to have the sustainability, but also the introduction of AI, I don't think just understand what the implications will be. I never thought when I connected to the internet on my modem, so to say, I never foresaw Spotify. So it was beyond anyone's imagination. So that means, and this is where Europe, I can think, play a role. Because if you don't know exactly what the future is, you need to find your way forward. And this is exactly what we also see in the finance of transition. There are frontrunners. There are good examples. And this is where we need to learn from. So all those experiments, new organizations that show us the way forward. And this is where Europe, I think, could come in, fostering good experiments, helping to get forward, but also collecting, bringing together, like this meeting here today, to see what our way forward is. It's like you are in the dark. You try to find your way forward by feeling around. So the impression I get. I like to think that we can sort of plot the future. Since I feel politics, there's always events, right? So it's very difficult, even though we have the future always in our mind in policy and policy making. It's very difficult to predict what will happen, and you need to adjust. And this is, I think, also the learning curve that is ahead of us. Of course, some elements of the discussion always come back. Employers complaining about the education of students. Right? So that's sort of, I can't help it. Politics could also explain about the university, because when our students arrive here, they're not ready for politics. I can tell you that. They need to learn on the job here. But for me, it just tells you that you need to find bridges between education and the corporates, and that is sort of mutual responsibility, because that will help you to make this transition at least on a smaller scale. So having said that, one more remark is I truly believe that, for example, when new technologies come to and need to come and will come into place, we also need to really benefit from those technologies. And this is now in the broader sense, it's not digital economy, it's also the way we do recycling, for example. We need to change the organization of our production drastically. It's only later on that we learn how to use the technology. In this case, Spotify as an example. We never thought of it until it came around. It's a different way of organizing your business and your business model. So that means that to have the full effect, we will have to change it and embed technology in our society, whether it's recycling or the digital technologies like AI. So I think we should be let's say modest and optimistic at the same time. Go forward and find our way forward, because that's what people expect from a group like this. To find our way forward, seeing where the possibilities are, seeing where the impossibilities are, seeing what are the good practices we need to build upon, and thus arrive at the change. The only problem I have with that, and I also had it yesterday, is the sense of urgency I sometimes feel. For me, it's a sort of emotional roller coaster sometimes. Because I understand how massive the change is we're going through. And at the same time, we want to complete the change in a couple of years' times, because we don't have much time left to save our planet. That's a sort of emotional roller coaster sort of in between. It's a daunting task, and at the same time, we need to hurry. It's sort of impossible to. And I'm going so back and forth in between those feelings. I think in all honesty, we need to have some time to find our way forward, especially since we can't plot our way forward. It's not. But I agree that at the end of the day, when someone said that, we need a systemic change for that to arrive at. So it's of all the different elements, you need in the end to add up to a different system for us to get the skills, the knowledge arrive at a sustainable economy and society, to benefit from all the possibilities that digital technology have. Yes, there are dangers, but hey, you can only sit here and be optimistic and also see what great possibilities lies there. So thank you very much for being here. It's a very inspiring discussion. Thank you. Sepa, would you like to answer this?
No.
No, really not. There's nothing for you, girl. Come on.
I've spoken this time enough.
Well, okay, thank you very much then. And then I think we conclude the meeting. Okay.